An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6, Chapter 66, Battle of Blackwater Rush. I'm sorry if I stumble over this, some militaristic terms are rather hard for me to pronounce. I'm glad I was, mostly, sober for when your husband confessed his strategic deception to us, your highness. Nursing a glass of watered wine, unlike the undiluted Dornish horse-piss Tyrion imbibed, Daenerys smirked at her hand. And why is that, Lord Tyrion? She missed Jon something fierce, but it was for the best. While he oversaw the spearhead to Highgarden and Sansa and Davos managed things back north, she and Tyrion stayed at Stony Sept, close to all the important crossroads at Blackwater Rush. He sipped at his goblet. Ned Stark always seemed as if his honour overwhelmed the most basic political reason. He didn't live long enough to find anyone discovering the depths of his cunning concerning Jon's real parentage. Now, at least, I could see his son/nephew demonstrate the cunning of an honourable man for me. At that moment the tent flap flew open and in walked Robb, face stretched in anger. Dany had seen that before. It had been when he notified her of Daario arriving in Dragonstone, only to betray her. "What is it, brother?" she asked him. "We've captured a Lannister scout, Daenerys, and you'll never guess who it is." The Dragon Empress cocked a single eyebrow. Hood draped over his head. The prisoner found himself shoved onto his knees. Finally, off my blistering feet. He had been moved quickly by the scouts after identifying him as high profile. All within the Northern Army remembered what had happened when the Kingslayer was captured, the rift created in between lords and the court that caused the fall of the young wolf. Now they were not taking any chances with any high-profile prisoner. Hood over the head, smuggled into the castles so as the men didn't see him. He heard the Stark bannermen mutter amongst each other until they fell silent. "What the fuck's going on?" asked Sir Bronn of the Blackwater. "I know we're at Stony Sept, so you morons can get this fucking thing off." "This isn't about our protection from you, Sir Bronn," came a placid yet chilled female voice. Bronn found the hood finally ripped away, blinking from the bright torchlight. "It is more for your protection from our men." As his eyes adjusted, he saw he was face to face with a petite, silver-haired goddess. The Dragon Empress in the flesh. She gave him a small smirk, lips ghosting upward at some silent humour. "Lannisters and their running dogs aren't the favourite guests of northern soldiers." Blinking, Bronn's gaze was naturally drawn to the diminutive form of the Empress's hand. "With all due respect, my lady, what's he doing here?" Hands bound behind his back, all the former sellsword could do was gesture with a tilt of his head. "I can see what you always said about him." Daenerys chuckled. "He hasn't changed one bit," Tyrion remarked, hand drifting to the scar on his cheek. "When Lannister blades mark you up, then the Northerners don't seem to be as violent towards you." He walked over and slapped Bronn on the back. "It's good to see you, old friend. Your brother told me that if he ever saw you again, I would cut you in half for betraying your family. But he didn't do so at the Dragon Pit. I guess it's off." Tyrion smiled sheepishly. "Good. Quarterman isn't nearly as good a nickname as Halfman." Clasping her hands together, Daenerys cleared her throat. "As amusing as this reunion is, Sir Bronn, why are you here?" The way she stalked around him, the small-framed Empress looked every inch a dragon. "They wouldn't send the hero of Blackwater Bay on a routine scouting mission unless it was scouting something important. Or it was something personal for you or your masters. So, which is it?" The Empress wouldn't accept bullshit, or flowery ass-kissing. Not that Bran would debase himself so. Burst out with it, moron. "I wish to switch sides. Not just me. But I won't name names just in case it gets back to the moron king." Sharing a glance with Tyrion, Daenerys didn't give anything away. "And what would you have to offer to prove your sincerity?" "My hand trusts you, but I need more." "How about the 11,000 men that are advancing towards the Blackwater Rush as we speak? Would that suffice?" Line break. "Why haven't you taken the castle, Grey Worm?" Watching the Emperor climb down Rhaegal's spines, it was obvious to the various unsullied captains and lieutenants that the quite annoyed John was about to explode. Around him, the Dothraki bloodriders grumbled in the same irritation. They had grown accustomed to soft beds, hearty ale, and meaty pies since arriving in Westeros, and couldn't wait for the accommodations of Highgarden. Stepping forward, Grey Worm bowed to John. "Your Majesty, my men need several hours to rest feet from march. When I began the order of our advance, Lady Tyrell ordered me stop." John's eyes narrowed. "Your orders come from me, and if I am unavailable, then from Sir Barristan." "I know, but—" Grey Worm's lips formed a slight grimace. "Lady Tyrell, she quite persistent." "Show me," John replied coldly. He did not want to deal with this right now. Grey Worm nodded, leading him to the command tent. The tent had been erected hastily over a large rock face, one of the few natural structures that marred the beautiful fields of the Reach. Several miles away, and as majestic as it would have been to someone at the gates, the beauty of Highgarden Castle was obscured by several pyres of smoke that rose into the blue sky in the deepest obscenity. A column of Unsullied stood stock-still, waiting for orders. The Dothraki cavalry milled about off the Roseful Road, in far less discipline, bored out of their minds. Occasionally a boom of an in-placed cannon roared across the landscape. No one but John looked up at it, and only the latter out of curiosity. "Some Lannisters dug in scattered hamlets. We're blasting them out," Grey Worm explained. "Good." The subject of their earlier discussions sat in a wood and canvas field chair, cane tapping upon the ground in bored contemplations. "Greetings, sire. I can recognize your footsteps a mile away. Just like Ned Stark's." Saying nothing, John took a seat in the cab chair just across from her. "You are not so dishonourable to make an old woman stand on crippled feet?" John didn't answer. "Why did you see it fit to halt my army?" "I am not having my home looted and burned by a group of horse-lord savages." She was as blunt as ever. "It seems to be doing a good job of that already. We need those food stores, Lady Tyrell, and your orders are delaying their capture." The people of Highgarden are loyal to House Tyrell. I can assure you, no Lannister moron would burn the food stores here without cooperation. And they won't give it. Pinching the bridge of his nose, John felt the frustration threatening to boil over. It had plagued him in this new iteration since that night at the Winterfell with Catelyn and Barristan, confessing the truth to Dany, only soothing it. She wasn't here, and the frustration returned. "Lady Tyrell, I appreciate your family's loyalty, but those people there have not sworn that same loyalty. They are pledged to Joffrey, and thus suspect." A snort left the old woman. "They would no more wish to follow Joffrey than they would well, I'm not saying that aloud." He was just so sick of it all. Sick of the complexities, sick of the squabbling lords, sick of the constant strain of imagining his impending death around every corner. Even though it was his plan, the temptation of shoving it into another's hands so he would have one less thing to deal with was quite intense. "Then what could you possibly have to offer me in this situation?" Cane clinking on the stone, Olenna hobbled over to John. Her gait was in shambles, but her piercing eyes belayed a sharp mind. "I may be old, but I am not useless. Send me in there under a banner of truce, and you will have Highgarden free and clear." Irritation nearly causing John to rebuff her and simply burn away the troublemakers with Rhaegal, the honour in his heart banished it away. "Very well. You have a day, Lady Tyrell. Appeal to their loyalty, or the Dothraki will have to appeal to their fear." Smug grins broke out among the blonde riders at his statement. Looking over to his shoulders, John's attention shifted to another matter. "Sam, a word?" It had been a surprise for Sam when his friend had instructed him to leave the River Run Library, his home base for research efforts, and trekked down with Gilly and Littlesand to the Riverlands following the Dragon Pit meeting. He knew how John's mind worked, so figured he had something big planned during the doubts and tight-lipped periods. But this was unreadable. It heartened the disinherited half-maester to see his ancestral kingdom once more, especially after facing his father, but he hadn't had a clue what John wanted. Soon the two were walking among the grass. Unlike further north, the weather was perfect, sunny and warm but with a cooling breeze. They both felt out of place in their northern-style leather. "The end of the middle is coming soon, Sam," said John cryptically, staring at the greasy black smoke over Highgarden. A small troop of horses were already galloping towards it, white flag fluttering. "The true fight awaits after, regardless of who wins." "You will win, John." He glanced over at the Emperor, so young yet so old at the same time. They had both been through more than most men would in multiple lifetimes. "If I've learned anything, it's never bet on Jon Snow." John smiled, grateful at Sam's comment. When before his bastard name brought him only shame and self-loathing, now it grounded him. Reminded him to not let the power and dignitas infect him completely. "I appreciate that, my friend, but we must plan for the worst." He looked back at the countryside to the south. "That is why I am ordering you to Oldtown, to be my personal representative to the College of Maesters." Sam blinked. "What?" Clasping Sam's shoulders, John locked eyes with his oldest friend. "I need you to do this, Sam. I need to know that there is a fallback, that there is someone to spread the warning of the long night." The earnestness was evident in John's voice. Sam nodded. "I shall, John. Don't worry." "Keep Gilly and my godson safe." The Emperor allowed himself a small smile. "And if you find the secret to Valyrian steel, and I live, let me know." The two shared a grin. "Your Majesty!" Trotting up to them, Ollie handed John 2 leaves of paper. "A raven from Oldtown and from Blackwater Rush." Mumbling his thanks, John looked each over. The one from Oldtown was simple. Having taken a fast horse, Tyene Martell had raised several thousand Dornish from several houses, still loyal to the legacy of Elia and Oberyn Martell. She had met up with Podrick, marching north with reinforcements from Essos, and all the Ironborn Marines after landing. All going to plan, he thought. The second was far shorter, from Dany. "Lannister forces less than a day's march away. Gendry a day's march away. Do not come north. We'll hold them off." John closed his eyes, breathing deeply. In all of this, one feeling he had yet to cope with was helplessness. Being unable to protect his family. The feeling had to be wished away. "Father," he prayed. "Mother. Uncle. Watch over Daenerys." Only the wind answered him. Line break. "Seven hells," muttered Kevan Lannister under his breath. Adam Marbrand had been right. Exaggerations correct. Before them stood what had to be the combined forces of all the northern houses. And despite the massive losses and divisions they had suffered since Robb Stark called their banners years before, the young wolf still commanded an impressive host. Spyglass dropping, Kevan's aide was pale. "The Dragon Queen is with them! With her dragon!" "Just one dragon?" At Riverrun she had 3. "Aye! There are smaller ones, but the scouts have them still at Riverrun." Well, at least they got something right. Kevan wished he had access to the little birds of Varys or Qyburn, but the former was with the enemy, and the latter was quite tight-lipped. Officers and lords riding on horseback in front of their men, guiding rows of warriors into position, each side maximising their advantage. Kevan had spread his forces out on 4 lines deep across a wide front, hoping to use his superior numbers to overwhelm the young wolf in a double envelopment, before any reinforcements could envelop them, as the Knights of the Vale had at the Battle of Winterfell. Hoping to use his superior numbers to overwhelm the young wolf in a double envelopment before any reinforcers could re-envelop him, as the Knights of the Vale had at the Battle of the Bastards. Meanwhile, the furious digging and entrenching had paid off for the Imperials. The Northerners made up for their deficiency in armour, chainmail and leather compared to the plate armour of the Westerlands regulars, with a line of earthworks along the shallow hillside west of the Blackwater Rush. Wooden spikes extended out like spines of a hedgehog, sparing warriors for reserve lines behind just in case of any breaches. Designed as a static formation to deal with heavy cavalry, Robb cursed as he found the only light sellsword cavalry accompanied the enemy regulars. "They won't be launching any cavalry assaults," he explained to his sister by marriage. "Stormcrows by their markings. Light cavalry. Probably to hit us on the side." "Their infantry will still be halted by the earthworks," Daenerys responded, clad in a white leather dress. She looked every inch a northern conqueror. "Any advantage to equalise the numerical disparity is welcome for us." Robb shook his head. That's not what I'm worried about. He gestured to the enemy flanks. They're spreading out. I need to put men out of the reserves to plug our left and right. That leaves only my cavalry in reserve. We need reinforcements. Gendry and the Stormland forces will arrive shortly, Dany answered, though she wished she was as confident as she sounded. In any case, they had Balerion. Kevan Lannister undoubtedly had nests of scorpions and rockets just for that eventuality, but it was just a risk she had to take. Patting Saracen, she left the command tent to take her place with her army. It started in the centre. Deliberately ordering his flanks to hold back for the right moment, Kevan Lannister sent the cream of his Lannister men-at-arms directly at the Imperial earthworks. Men that had bled and died at the Whispering Wood, Riverrun and the God's Eye. Men that had never broken. Charged forth in good order, covered by a barrage of 1/4 to 100 rockets, batteries. The earthworks afforded a decent protection on the Northerners. Robb Stark and Robert Glover answering back with the 36 cannons snugly emplaced behind the men. Scores of men fell in bloody heaps as the Lannisters reached the earthworks, beginning the melee. Smoke from the firing artillery wreathed the battlefield in a haze, the roar of guns and rockets only joined by the clash of metal and the screams of the fallen. Cohesion among the attackers was weakened, yet not eliminated by the staves, organised formations, falling upon the less armoured northern shield wall in a contest of muscle and grit. Archers and crossbowmen added their payloads to the fray, earlier scores changing to hundreds as each of the minutes ticked by. Whatever tactics had begun the battle now devolved into a pure chaotic brawl. Present throughout the carnage was the black form of Balerion the Dread Reborn. Flying low, Daenerys guided him on an attack run after attack run. Lessons learnt from the near tragedy at Riverrun, almost what seemed like an eternity ago. Fire spewed from his open maw, targeting whatever clusters of forces he could before bolts or rockets forced Daenerys to break off. Nevertheless, many struck home. Every minute or so, Balerion bellowed with pain as a bolt slammed into his flesh or a rocket exploded close and peppered him with shrapnel. Hitting closer to the front would have been safer, but Dany refused to put any of her own men at risk of friendly fire. Viserys would undoubtedly have, as would many kings and queens and conquerors, but not Dany. She wouldn't crush her own under the wheel. Flames drying up as a cluster of Lannister forces from the far left of their line immolated in a fiery inferno, Daenerys had just urged Balerion to gain altitude when a loud explosion detonated just under her abdomen. A piercing cry of pain left the dragon's maw, Dany holding on tight to his spines as the dragon jolted. She urged him higher, pleaded for him to rise above the threat of the ranged artillery, but he refused, stunned wings refusing to flap as the mighty beast slammed it into the ground, muddy and from the snowmelt. Dany tumbled off the soft patch of grass. Her body ached, bruised likely all over her body, but a quick pat down, listening to her child's grunts and roars, indicated that all was relatively fine. "It's the dragon, bitch!" Eyes widening in alarm, Dany scrambled to her feet to find at least 6 stormcrows galloping towards her, scimitars gleaming in the sunlight as they gunned for her. On instinct, she drew Saracen from her hip and waited for the onslaught. Dragon incapacitated from the sheer pain of his wounds, the raider in the van saw the grounded Empress as an easy target. Gross underestimation. Nimbly, Daenerys crouched to her knees, dodging the downward slash, Saracen slicing cleanly through the horse's legs, sending it and the rider toppling to the ground in a sickening crunch of bone. The one behind pulled on the reins to dodge, only to fall from the horse all the same. Dany brought her blade to slash across the third's stomach. The second had scrambled to his feet, attacking Dany with ferocity. She parried blow after blow, reflexes quicker than her foe. The final blow sent his head clean off with an area drop of blood marring the fine metal. Before the 4th sellsword, this one dismounted, slammed into her gut, and slammed Daenerys into the ground. Coughing dust from her lungs, in a blink of an eye, Dany's sight shifted from the sellsword raising his scimitar to the crimson blood spurting from his chest, as a northern knight rammed him through with a broadsword. The attacker collapsed onto the ground, nothing but a boneless corpse spilling blood upon the ground. "Your Highness," stated the knight, extending his hand. Daenerys took it, allowing him to pull her to her feet. All around laid the still bodies of remaining sellswords, the detachment of northern cavalry spilling about on the very edge of battle. "All thanks upon you, Sir Castle, Your Highness, of Winterfell," He was a young lad, no more than 22, past his name day. He glanced at Balerion, who was coming to from his torpor and pain. Will he be all right, Empress? Willing herself not to sigh and dishearten her men, Daenerys nodded. My children are strong. They have survived worse. The stories Jon had told her of how Rhaegal had nearly died at Hardhome still haunted her. She moved to Balerion's side, while the knight mounted his horse. May the old gods grant you their blessings, Sir Castle. Gently stroking Balerion's scales as the knight rode away, Daenerys heard the thunder of thousands of hoofbeats over the din of battle. It was the Stormcrows moving into position to attempt to turn their flank. She cursed. Not enough reserves to hold them back for too long. Where in the seven hells was Gendry? Line break. Sitting high in the saddle, Gendry Baratheon felt every inch a true highborn for the first time in his life. His feet dangled in the stirrups as he guided his mount across the front line of tightly packed troops. Shields packed tightly, swords and spears drawn, 6,000 steel helmets glinted in the sun. They stretched 5 battalions wide, 2 deep, banners glinting in the cool wind that brought them relief from their sweltering armour. The finest the Stormlands had to offer, bending the knee to the Empress Daenerys at Riverrun, and fighting for their bastard lord rather than the Lannister lord. Gendry looked upon the closest banner, a mighty stag, antlers high in defiance, to the scorching fires surrounding it. The fires of his forge, only this time to reforge the destiny of House Baratheon from one of treason to one of loyalty, of honour and fidelity. Men of the Stormlands! He cried, his usually reserved demeanour being swept up in the moment. This is our time! Too long have we fought and bled for the wrong cause, one that brought nothing but ruin for the world. Today, we reclaim our honour. He drew his warhammer, holding it mightily in the air. Forward for Storm's End! As the men cheered, Gendry was clearly a sight to behold. A true stag, a lord his uncles would have been proud to see. Preparing the charge across the sunlit field of glory, he looked every inch what Robert Baratheon should have been. Line break. They're coming! The hue and cry ran out across the Lannister front, from the reserve forces to the foot soldiers already engaged in the bloody melee with the dug-in northerners. Positioned perfectly on the gently sloping hillside to see the roadway from to the north. See the gleaming steel and waving banners of the Stormlanders, fully rested and advancing double quick to slam into the unprotected flank. Orders came quickly. All forces on the Lannister left, initially being held back in order to hit the forces of House Manderly, currently battling with those men of House Marbrand fighting to avenge their fallen lord, were commanded to swing back and face Gendry Baratheon, who outnumbered them 3-1. The Stormcrows had already broken out into a half-charge by the time the order had reached them. Sellsword captains rapidly attempted to reel them back in. Robb Stark personally led his reserve of 500 Northern cavalry in a countercharge. Lances and swords slicing through the unarmoured sellswords, the Lannisters' right turning into a slaughterhouse of men and steed that remained as many a Northerner as the Battle of the Bastards. It was a single battalion of troops that held the line. Brave farmers and ranchers hailing from the same collection of villages and hamlets 30 miles southeast of Lannisport. On the orders of Kevin Lannister himself, ashen-faced and with his mount bleeding from several wounds, the 300 men hunkered down in place with 50 crossbowmen and a rocket battery. They formed into a tight square, spears and shields pointed outward just as the Stormlanders swarmed around them and their mad assault on the hated Lannister army. Time stretched out interminably, while combining with the duopoly of the rapid motion of savagery racing past each man on each side of the conflict. Shadows danced upon the dead grass, obscured by the grey smoke of power and the greasy black smoke of smouldering dragonfire. Men stood, men ran, men collapsed in bloody heaps all in one fluid continuum. They hacked away with blades, poured water or wine down thirsty gullets out of leather waterskins, picking up weapons from the fallen once theirs were damaged beyond repair or lost in the melee. Imperial cannon and Lannister rockets fired with wild abandon, archers on both sides just aiming in the direction of the enemy and firing. Anything to increase their fire rate. Gendry forced his command forward at the Lannister flank and away from the distraction that was the battalion square. But there was no truly escaping it. The presence of hundreds of armed armed enemy forces to the right of the centre of their force was a threat, unable to ignore, thus minimizing the impact of their envelopment. The men within the square, surrounded by a snarling mass of humanity bent on ripping them apart for actions of their liege lord, burrowed their spears and shields upon the ground in defiance. They cut up their banners out of honour as they archers and rockets unloaded in every direction. Standing until overrun, every minute found themselves pulling back as comrade upon comrade fell, and the sheer weight of the Baratheons forced them closer together. Until the battle stilled with the arrival of the Black Dread. Blood oozing over several wounds, marring his red-black scales, Balerion, nonetheless, stilled the entire field with his ear-splitting bellow. Bracing for the fiery death by inferno that far stronger and braver warriors before them had failed to live to tell the tale, the battalion square only found a shower of slobber drenching them. The dragon kept his fire glands dry for the time being. Atop him, the majesty of the Dragon Empress, blade gleaming in the sun, gazed down upon them. Her formerly ice-blue jacket was marred with blood and greasy soot. Not her blood. "Men of the Westerlands, I implore you that you surrender!" It was a plea, but Daenerys did not lower herself while giving it. In the stilled fighting, the battalion commander, a knight of mid-level repute, stepped forward. His arm hung limply, bleeding from his shoulder. "How much time did we buy?" he asked simply. "Enough," Daenerys replied, indulging him. "You demonstrated your fighting spirit. Now surrender honourably. Enough lives have been shed in this war. Do not sacrifice your brave men for the savage brute that sits in King's Landing." Blood dripping from Saracen, Balerion hissing once she finished her plea. It was left unsaid what Daenerys would do if they declined. Silence, for the first time since the battle had begun, reigned for interminable moments. The standoff brought great tension among both sides, as the decisions of one man hung in the balance. Would he choose a personal humiliation and let his boys live another day, or choose the fire and blood offered by the Dragon Empress as punishment for defiance? His choice would be the opposite of the brother of his liege lord outside of Riverrun on another fateful day like this. "Put down your spears and shields, boys! Our war is over!" A relieved breath left Dany's lungs at the decision. These brave men didn't deserve a fiery death simply for allowing allegiance to evil men with black intentions. Although the Lannister force lived to fight another day thanks to the sacrifice of the boys of the Westerlands, armed with the knowledge that the reports that Adam Marbrand had died to deliver the army of the Divine Chimera, the lion had been beaten off with its tail between its legs. The dragon placed the laurels upon her head, for she had secured victory that day. Line break. Rose of Unsullied remained completely still out of training and familiarity as the Black Dread Reborn landed on the ground with a loud thud. He spread his wings, roaring loudly as Daenerys held her position on Dragonback with ease. Soon the dragon settled from exhaustion and the fatigue of his various wounds. Bundled in an all-black coat, Saracen strapped to her hip, Dany climbed down and found what she was looking for. Stark and Targaryen banners unfurled in blurs of red, black and grey, fluttering in the wind. Jon stepped from the welcoming party to meet his beloved halfway. Behind them, a massive rose banner graced the highest point of the newly restored seat of House Tyrell, wards of the Reach by order of the Empress. Expression regal, Dany gave a curt nod. "Emperor Jon." "Your Highness," Jon bowed, inwardly enjoying the theatrics of it all. Based on the barely hidden dragonfire smirk on her face, he knew that she was enjoying this as well. "May I present, as a present to you, High Garden Castle." Smile stretching from ear to ear, Daenerys returned a short curtsy. "You are most appreciated, Your Majesty." And with that it was done. The Emperor had succeeded in his quest. High Garden was captured along with all the food stores for King's Landing, a prize that none in the Lannister army could ignore. Jon had forced Tywin's hand, and ensured the sight of the next field of battle, the one that would decide the Emperor's war. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that because, wow, Jon and Dany bringing the fire. Yes! And I appreciate their honour as well, not just, I am honourable and that is it. No, they're genuinely showing it by showing mercy to their enemies. I appreciate that. And, Olenna, what can you do? And I want to say something. I'm sorry for the quality. Again, recording has been a bit all over the place recently, so if any echoing is in the background or sounds, I apologise. I'm doing what I can here, people. Anyway, you guys all know the drill by this point, I hope. Remember to check out my other videos. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or wherever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!